Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're covering a build that is newly possible in patch 7. A build which pops up out of the darkness behind your enemies, cuts their throats, and then melts back into the shadows unseen. A build which I'm calling the Shadow Assassin of Baal. This build was unfortunately afflicted by a bug up until patch 7, but since that's been resolved, it is now exactly as awesome as it should be, and in my opinion, makes one of the best and most thematic builds for Astarion, or especially for a Dark Urge player character. So if you're looking to get the new evil endings available as of patch 7 and are taking a spin with the Dark Urge, then this is very likely the build for you. Let's get to it. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Dolores Abernathy for the $20, John Walker for the $25, and Tim for the $5 donation, as well as Hudson Miles, Mike Tibbles, Captain Dixon, and M for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support. And to everyone who donated or became a member while I was away, thank you very much, and I'll make sure to thank you properly over the coming days. Alright, let us build the Shadow Assassin of Baal. I'm using Astarion as the example character here, because this is a sneaky, stabby knife build, which is perfect for Astarion thematically, and also because his unique character abilities are incredible for this build. His early game bonus to hit and his late game additional damage synergize incredibly with this character build. The sheer number of attacks that we're making take massive advantage of Astarion's additional bonus damage that he gets in the late game, so we can use his unique companion abilities to the maximum degree and empower the build as much as possible. However, this is also an amazing build for a Dark Urge, so if you're building this as a custom character, then I recommend Dwergar. It's both thematic and allowing you to start combat invisibly gives you a ton of options to sneak up on unaware enemies and defeat them before they even know what's going on. Or Drow or Half-Drow are also very powerful for this build as well, because this build does have the option to abuse darkness, and so Drow's additional casts of darkness will synergize incredibly with this build. You, of course, also the usual suspects are very good. Githyanki for once per day Misty Step and additional skill access, Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for additional movement speed, or Halfling to reroll ones, which is obviously an incredibly powerful ability, are all excellent picks for this character as well, but there is special synergy with Drow and Dwergar for this build. We're starting with a level of Rogue, because when you are multi-classing between Rogue and another class, it's often good to start with Rogue, and this character, being a dexterity build with Rogue levels, can be your lockpicking character, so starting right from level 1 with expertise in Sleight of Hand means that you never have to worry about picking locks, so it adds a lot of utility and synergy to your party as well. For our attribute selection here, we get away with the greediest possible attribute split, because this build is entirely single attribute dependent. We only really need our dexterity to be as high as possible. But we also gain significant synergy from wisdom, so rather than taking 16 constitution, as you'll often see in these highest possible 3 attribute builds, the greedy attribute split, we're going to take 16 wisdom and 15 constitution. You will rarely get targeted with this build because you'll be invisible or hiding in shadows almost all the time, so slightly lower hit points are not really a problem, and wisdom is going to increase our armor class from our monk levels, so important to boost that as much as possible. For our skill selection here, we're going to take expertise in stealth and sleight of hand. Very important to have both of those. This character can also be your party face. You could maybe go for a 16-16-14 split and take 12 charisma if you want to do some conversations, or you can just put the remaining points wherever you want them into, for example, acrobatics and insight, but make sure that you get expertise in sleight of hand and stealth, because you're going to be making those checks a lot with this character. That's all we have to do at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're going to be immediately leaving Rogue and taking a level of Monk. We want to get our Monk levels as fast as possible, because we want to hit extra attack as quickly as we can, and the powerful tools that even one level of Monk gives to this build can't be overstated. You immediately get Flurry of Blows, which gives you multiple offhand attacks. Very powerful. This build can use 2 weapons in the early game and will use 2 weapons in the later game, but Flurry of Blows gives you an extra attack, so you have 3 attacks right from the beginning, starting at level 2. And because we have unarmored defense on our monk levels, and took high wisdom from the beginning, this gives us 16 base armor class right from the beginning of the game, which most characters are not going to be able to meet. So defensively, we're also going to be stronger than a lot of other characters right from the beginning of the game, without even requiring any gear to reach that level. We also get Dexterous Attacks, which lets you use non-finesse weapons with your dexterity. So we can attack using a weapon that doesn't have the finesse property with our dexterity, meaning that we get to upgrade our weapons a little bit over what a rogue will typically be using. Now, if a weapon doesn't have the finesse weapon tag, we won't be able to sneak attack with it, even though we're attacking with our dexterity with it, but we can use a non-finesse weapon in our main hand and a finesse weapon in our offhand, if we have multiple light weapons, for example, and trigger sneak attack that way, or simply use a finesse weapon like a rapier, dagger, or short sword in the early game in order to make sure that we're triggering sneak attack, and then make multiple attacks with our unarmed strikes. So basically we have a lot of different options for how to equip the character right from the beginning of the game, depending on exactly what equipment you found and what the rest of your party needs. Monk also, of course, just gives us an additional attack every round with the bonus unarmed strike, which is very helpful, and a third attack with Flurry of Blows, so we get a ton of additional damage. At character level 3, we're taking another level of Monk, giving us 10 feet of additional movement speed. For a melee character like this is extremely helpful, but remember also that this character is a dexterity-based character, so you will be able to use archery just as effectively as any other character, especially in the early game. So you can either use your additional movement speed to close with enemies and attack them in melee more effectively, or run away from enemies and shoot them with bows. Both of those options are available to you, so you get a lot of tactical possibilities from having additional movement speed and just being a dexterity-based character. We also get Patient Defense, Step of the Wind, and Dash and Disengage. So if needed to close additional distance, you can use Step of the Wind Dash to get up close to enemies, or to run away. And of course, in Honor mode, running away is a pretty powerful strategy. Sometimes the fight starts going badly and you just need to leave. Having a character like this one who can leave combat very, very easily by having a ton of additional movement speed is a pretty helpful thing for a lot of parties to have. And later in the game, we'll get a lot of evasive tools where we can become invisible or hide very easily as well, which makes getting out of combats that are turning against you much easier. Just a great insurance policy for your Honor mode runs in general. At character level 4, we take a third level of Monk, and we get to take our Monk subclass. Of course, the subclass that we're going to choose is going to be the Way of the Shadow Monk, because we wouldn't be a Shadow Assassin if we weren't a Way of Shadow Monk. This gives us a bunch of cool options. For one thing, it adds a bonus action Hide to our arsenal as well. So even without our second rogue level, we already have all of the cool rogue bonus actions. We have bonus action Dash and Disengage from level 2 Monk, and bonus action Hide from Shadow Monk, giving us a ton of options for how to approach combats. We can now attack an enemy, kill them, and then hide again to prevent retaliation, move around the battlefield much more easily. This just gives you a lot of additional options. You also get Pass Without Trace, which means that we will be able to have much higher stealth checks, so we can even move in front of enemies, as long as there's some form of obscurement, and pass those stealth checks pretty reliably if we spend key points on this. Now, you'll still probably prefer to use a spell slot for this from an ally who can cast it, but this is a great option, and later on in the game will let us abuse greater invisibility, for example, very easily, because Pass Without Traces plus 10 to stealth checks plus our expertise in stealth checks makes us basically unfindable. Darkness, of course, a very powerful spell. This character doesn't naturally get immunity to darkness. We don't have warlock levels, but combined with any of the items, like the Eversight Ring, that make you immune to blindness, you can really make yourself much more powerful and enemies much less powerful if you can keep them trapped in a cloud of darkness. So always a great option for every character to have. Silence, also very useful, just having access to this. So the way the Shadow Monk spells are actually quite powerful, even though this version of Silence isn't a ritual spell, so it is going to cost you a spell slot. Sometimes you just need to lock down a spellcaster or kill an enemy silently, which is both thematic and pretty useful if you're playing a stealth playstyle. So having access to Silence on this character does help out. You also get Minor Illusion as a cantrip, which of course is an incredibly powerful tool, and especially useful for a Way of the Shadow Monk, because you want enemies to be standing near shadows. You want them to be standing near areas of darkness. Before you enter combat, you can use Minor Illusion to pull enemies towards unlit areas of the map, so that you can then teleport on top of them, so that you can hide more easily, and this gives you a lot of control over how combats are played. I've talked extensively in various builds and spell tier lists and stuff about how Minor Illusion is an incredibly powerful tool, but for this build in particular, it's really, really good because you can use it to split apart enemies, isolate them apart from their allies before combat starts, and kill them before anyone can come to help them. You can use it to pull enemies towards areas of darkness to give you a ton of additional mobility when we hit level 6, and make sure that you always have somewhere to hide, because you're always in an obscured area. There's a lot of different options that Minor Illusion gives you, so the fact that this character has it built in and doesn't rely on an ally to use it is actually quite nice in terms of quality of life for this build also. At character level 5, we take our 4th level of Monk, which both gives us additional key points, which this build is quite hungry for if we are using our Monk spells pretty frequently, and also, of course, a feat. For our feat, it's very easy. We're just going to take an ability improvement to buff our dexterity, which improves our damage, as well as increasing our constitution, giving us a pretty reasonable hit point pool. 43 isn't incredible, but for a relatively squishy character at this point, it's fine. And this just lets us even out our stats as much as possible. Now, I said that we take the greedy attribute split, the 17, 16, 15 split, and most of the time it won't matter to have the extra 2 points in something else, but this build does jump sometimes, so you may have wanted to have 12 strength and do like 12, 16, 16, 14, rather than 17, 16, 15. Up until this point, if you did that, then just respec to reach 18, 16, 16, because these are the most important stats for you by far. At Monk level 5, we get extra attack, and of course Stunning Strike, so any character that we can't kill in a single round of combat, we can attempt to stun. This will obviously let us shut down enemies very powerfully. We can stun, sneak attack, jump up on isolated enemies, and prevent them from getting to their allies. And remember that what you want to do with this character is pull apart groups of enemies using Minor Illusion, and then ambush isolated enemies one at a time. A stunned enemy who has no allies near them is food, sometimes literally if you're playing Astarion, so you will be able to assassinate isolated enemies very easily by pulling them away from their allies with Minor Illusion, jumping out on them with Stunning Strike to prevent them from fighting back, and then killing them because you are sneaking up on them. If we're a Dwergar also, then at level 5 we got out of combat invisibility, which makes it even easier to get up to enemies without them noticing and assassinate them. And of course, if you're the Dark Urge, if you then kill them, you become invisible again, which lets you repeat the process over and over, so you can chain sneak from enemy to enemy invisibly, killing them one at a time without triggering the entire combat frequently, which allows you to pick apart some of the more difficult encounters in the game and take them piecemeal. We also, of course, because we're a Shadow Monk, get Cloak of Shadows, which lets us do that strategy even without the Dwergar invisibility, so we have tons of ways to become invisible on this character, and a lot of enemies simply can't deal with invisibility from the players, so you will be able to remain unharmed sort of no matter your positioning, because a lot of enemies just can't do anything to you if you're invisible, and you can sneak up on them to start combat in exactly the way that you want to, with surprise rounds and everything in your favor. But it's at character level 7 where the magic happens. At this level, we reach our 6th level of Shadow Monk and get access to one of my very favorite abilities in the game, Shadow Step. This lets you teleport from shadow to shadow as a bonus action. As long as there is darkness where you leave and darkness where you arrive, you can spend a bonus action to teleport there. So it's effectively at-will Misty Step. Misty Step is one of the more powerful abilities in the game for positioning, and this is Misty Step kind of whenever you want it, so it's great for getting into and out of combat, making sure you're attacking the right enemies. This is also where the bug fix that appeared in patch 7 makes this build so much cooler, because Shadow Step gives you advantage on your next melee attack after you pop out of the darkness behind someone, which makes sense, because you're surprising them from the darkness. But up until patch 7, this advantage wouldn't allow you to sneak attack, even though you're supposed to be able to sneak attack on any attack that you have advantage with. After patch 7, you can now teleport out of the shadows on someone and gain a sneak attack against them from the darkness, which lets you assassinate them immediately. Especially if you combine this with the ability to critically hit, to guarantee criticals or have high critical chance. This can be a lot of additional damage at will against other enemies without any positioning requirements other than that they be in darkness, which is easy to achieve because you can pull them into areas of darkness using minor illusion, and you can sneak around invisibly extinguishing torches before combat starts to make sure that the arena is dark that you're fighting in. You also get additional unarmored movement, which makes you even faster to move from enemy to enemy. So, of course, bonus action teleport does cost you a flurry of blows, so using Shadow Step sometimes will be giving up some damage, but the ability to position yourself anywhere on the battlefield at will is so powerful for making sure that you're always attacking the right targets and making sure that you're assassinating key enemies, that it more than makes up for the damage loss to use this ability frequently. And of course you get sneak attack and stuff to do additional damage as well. Sometimes you may want to just run to the next enemy and start punching them, and that is of course excellent as well. But being able to reposition all over the battlefield gives this character so much versatility, and of course is so thematically cool, that it's very much worth doing. At level 8, we are going to leave Monk. We've now gotten all of the things that we need from it, the ability to teleport all over the map, and so we want to empower our sneak attacks, which we can now make basically at will by taking additional levels of Rogue. This also gives us bonus action hide, dash, and disengage, which means that we can now dash and disengage as a bonus action without spending a key point, so we'll have more of those for flurries and stuns, and just gives us even more mobility around the battlefield. This character, I know I've said this a lot, but it really bears repeating for this character. This is maybe the single most mobile character in the game, and so the amount of positioning advantage that this gives you when you're approaching fights is immeasurable, and the ability to just get out of combats when you need to is incredibly useful as well. But really, of course, we're in Rogue for what every monk wants to be in Rogue for, and that is level 3 Rogue, where we get to take Thief. This gives us an additional bonus action, which for this character is even better than it is for other monks, because not only can we use it to cast double flurry of blows in a turn for massive damage, or additional offhand attacks, or just running around the battlefield with Step of the Wind, or dash and everything, we can also use it to teleport behind an enemy, attack that enemy with a sneak attack, and then also flurry of blows them in the same turn, or teleport behind an enemy, kill them with our main hand attacks, and then hide immediately with a second bonus action, letting us bamf from shadow to shadow, kill an enemy, and then immediately hide afterwards, meaning that enemies will never get to retaliate against you as long as you're able to pretty consistently kill them, because you have all of this additional opportunity to re-enter invisibility. Of course, the additional bonus action also means we can dash 3 times our very, very long movement speed. So if an enemy does somehow catch you and things start to go badly, you can just go to the moon and run away, and the combat will end safely, and you can re-engage in it at your leisure. So the hit-and-run tactics happen both in the fight and out of the fight. At level 10, we are going to, of course, take our 4th level of Rogue to be able to get our 2nd feat, and the feat that we're going to take is an ability improvement to maximize our dexterity. Obviously, max dexterity is great. Being a dexterity character is in and of itself a huge advantage, because it gives you armor class and initiative, in addition to damage and accuracy, so this character gets to maximize that as well. It's also worth noting that we have decent armor class, even if we're unarmored, because we're going to have 18 base armor class with our dex and our wisdom, and then you can add a little more to that with items. So even if you do get targeted, which you won't frequently, this character does get pretty good armor class and very high armor class for a monk build. Now, at this point, we have a lot of choices as to what we do with our last 2 levels. There's a lot of great options that power up the build significantly. Some obvious ones include 2 more levels of Rogue, just to increase our sneak attack damage, 2 more levels of Monk to give us more key points, which this build can be quite starved for key points, so 2 more levels of Monk definitely helps out with that. And then also, of course, you get another feat, with which you could take something like Alert, always good even on dexterity builds, Dual Wielder, which is pretty cool for this build because you can use non-finesse weapons in your main hand and finesse weapons in your offhand to trigger sneak attack with your offhand attacks while still getting the maximum damage from your monk weapons in your main hand attack. So Dual Wielder gives you a lot of options for your equipment. Even something like Mobile can make this character even more slippery and evasive, or Mage Slayer to give you the ability to shut down spellcasters even more, or Lucky just to stop anything from going wrong. Lots of amazing options for additional feats. 2 levels of Fighter could help you burst down enemies using Action Surge for additional attacks. But I'm actually going to suggest something different than all of those, and we're going to take a class dip that increases our damage output turn after turn after turn massively, and that is, we're going to take 2 more levels of Druid. Druid gives us a bunch of cantrips and spells, which actually have a lot of utility for this character, so we're going to take as our cantrip selection here, Guidance and Resistance. This gives us both the ability to just have these, which this character makes a lot of skill checks, so having Guidance and Resistance is pretty useful. And you can just concentrate on Resistance going into fights as well for a little bit of bonus saving throws. One of the few things that can actually shut down this character is if you get hit by a debilitating saving throw, because you're very hard to kill with damage, since you will have good armor class and just be running away from enemies. Resistance just makes that a little less likely to happen, but also, more importantly, it gives you a spell that you can concentrate on, so you can use things like the Ring that does additional damage when you're concentrating. And then, of course, you get a couple utility spells like Healing Word, Long Strider, and Jump to give you even more mobility, and let's say Create Water just for utility. These are all little minor bonuses, but of course the real prize when we're taking Druid levels here is at Druid level 2, we get to be the Circle of the Spores Druid, which gives us Symbiotic Entity, so all of our attacks, which we're doing up to 6 attacks in a round without any haste or anything from allies, do an additional 1d6 of necrotic damage. This damage also combines with any bonuses to critical hit chance that we have, with the advantage that we're likely to have on just about every attack. So, Symbiotic Entity increases our damage output dramatically on this character, because it works off your Monk Flurry of Blows, it works off of your main hand attacks, and just lets you burst down enemies that much more quickly, and more consistently than something like a Fighter level, which you can only Action Surge once per short rest. You can Symbiotic Entity constantly, as long as you're not taking damage. Since this character will very rarely take damage, because any enemy you pop out on is going to be stunned or dead, and then you're going to be hidden or invisible afterwards, you can easily maintain the Symbiotic Entity temp HP, even though there's only 8 of it, to gain the extra bonus damage constantly. So it just powers up your damage dramatically to take 2 levels of Druid. But like I said, any of those additional options to rogue levels, to monk levels, to fighter levels, to druid levels, or to levels in anything else of your choice, honestly, will help with this build regardless. So this is just my favorite of the options, but there's a lot of room for customization with those last 2 levels. Alright, my friends, that is the Shadow Assassin of Baal build, but of course we can power up this character even further with items, illithid powers, and appropriate selection of gear, so let's go ahead and do that. For items for this character, you operate pretty independently of gear, although there are a couple items that you are looking for specifically. Luckily, since those are monk items, unless you have another monk in your party, you're unlikely to be in conflict with any party members for specific pieces of gear, and so this character should fit into just about any party without causing conflict in terms of what items you're looking for. Some of those specific items include the Booth of Uninhibited Kushigo, which will just increase all of your unarmed attack damage by 3, which is a pretty powerful addition to all of your damage output, of course, because you have up to 2 Flurry of Blows every turn. You can also use a finesse weapon in your offhand to trigger sneak attacks, and then main hand attack with an unarmed strike to do more unarmed strikes, and then do like 1 sneak attack with a bonus action, and 2 unarmed strikes with your main hand, 2 more unarmed strikes with your offhand. There's a lot of cool ways that you can build this character depending on exactly what gear you have, and you're going to want to experiment a bit in order to maximize your damage output at different stages in the game. In the early game, you're almost certainly going to want the Graceful Cloth. The increase to your dexterity, as well as advantage on dexterity checks, make this the best in slot item for monks, because it's an unarmored vest that increases your armor class, and makes you even better at doing what you're doing, increasing your damage output, and the advantage on dex checks means that in combination with expertise on lockpicking and stealth, you will never fail those checks, so it's incredibly powerful for this character. And then in the late game, you may want to swap that for the Best of Soul Rejuvenation, though honestly you can stick with the Graceful Cloth all game, and that would be fine too, and let you put another feat into Dual Wielder, for example. But the Best of Soul Rejuvenation is generally best in slot for monks with the Greater Kushigo counter ability and additional armor class. I actually just realized that I haven't tested yet if the trick where you deliberately provoke an attack of opportunity on your turn to trigger Greater Kushigo counter with your reaction, and that triggers extra attack still works. So somebody let me know in the comments if that trick still works. Even if it doesn't, you can still deliberately provoke an attack of opportunity for 1 additional attack, which is very useful with the Best of Soul Rejuvenation. You will want any items that boost your critical hit chance. Is very important for this character, because we are trying to trigger our sneak attack and adding a bunch of damage dice to our damage. Things like the Knife of the Undermountain King that increase your critical hit chance, and Deadshot, when equipped, increases your critical hit chance. Also, this build has 20 dexterity, so you can just shoot things if you need to as well. Items like the Shadeslayer Cloak that increase your critical hit are very good, though, of course, the Cloak of Protection can increase your armor class, which this character may want in addition to that. Items that give you additional damage dice, like the Helldusk Gloves, are awesome for this character because we're attacking so often and we'll be critically hitting pretty frequently, so we'll multiply the damage on those. And so the additional damage that we get from those helps out with killing things much more quickly. Once we have our druid levels, we can concentrate on a spell and use the Strange Conduit Ring for additional damage, or of course you can just use an item that gives you a concentration spell to be able to trigger this for even more damage dice per attack. This character also gets a couple cool options for items. These aren't necessarily optimal, but are very cool. You can go with Darkness Synergy with this character, with something like Char's Spear of Evening that makes you immune to blindness, so it's going to let you fight at full efficiency in darkness, which of course, because we're a Shadow Monk, we can cast darkness ourselves. If we're a Drow, we can cast it just from our racial spell. So Char's Spear of Evening does a bunch of damage, and because we're a monk, we can attack with this using our dexterity, because it counts as a monk weapon. So this is a very powerful option for this character, and the +3 weapon enchantment on it means we do 3 extra damage with all of our main hand attacks, which is great, obviously. Another fun option for this character, and one that I like because I think this item is very cool and doesn't see a lot of play, but actually is pretty nice, is to use Cold Snap as your offhand weapon in combination with things that add cold damage to your attacks. There's a set of monk gloves that add cold damage to your unarmed strikes, and you can use the Drakethroat Glaive to cast Draconic Elemental Weapon, which lets you imbue an additional d4 of cold damage to your main hand attacks. And so the Cold Snap, how this works is it gives you +1 armor class, good for just an offhand weapon to have that passive ability already. But also, if a creature misses you with an attack, they have to pass a save or become chilled, which makes them vulnerable to cold damage. You can deliberately provoke attacks of opportunity with the Cold Snap to potentially chill an enemy and potentially get an attack against them with the Vest of Soul Rejuvenation in order to make them vulnerable to cold damage. So if your party's doing cold damage, if you have cold damage on your weapons or on your gloves or anything along those lines, then you can use Cold Snap for a pretty cool effect on this character. I also think it's very thematic for a Shadow Assassin to use this ice-themed offhand dagger. So that's a fun option that I recommend. I don't think it's the most powerful way to build the character. The most powerful way is just the normally strong finesse weapons or Char's Spear of Evening. But it's such a cool option that it's one that I wanted to mention. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the Shadow Assassin of Baal. I highly recommend this character. It is a blast to play with the amount of mobility and options you have every single turn of every combat, and the ability to pop out on unsuspecting enemies and obliterate them before they ever notice what's happening. Just feels so thematic and cool. Great for Astarion, great for Dark Urges. And, of course, Dark Urge builds are all the rage right now because of the new evil endings. So use this build and experience those with ease, and let me know how it goes. As always, of course, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm when people do that, so I really do appreciate you doing that. YouTube cares about the interactions a lot, so, you know, I really annoys me that I have to harass people about this all the time, but it really does matter. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get notified about future Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game content. For some reason, I couldn't say that. But anyways, thank you for watching, my friends, and I will catch you next time.